Recently, a fellow woodworker was asking questions about building a coopered lid for a trunk that he's making. And he wanted to do 12 staves, all of equal width, or at least with equal exposure on the top. And he was trying to figure out how to come up with the angles that he needs to bevel each stave at in order to get that to work correctly. Fortunately, in SketchUp you can do this graphically, and in this video I'll show you how. Of course, you could calculate those angles if you were so inclined, but I think doing this in SketchUp and actually seeing the results, knowing that they're right, is very powerful. So take a look at this. So here's the trunk ready for a lid. I've already drawn in the front and back pieces for the lid frame. They're going to get a bevel on them, but we'll do that after the coopered part of the lid is in place, and we'll let it inform us about what that bevel angle needs to be. So I'm going to use the 2-point arc tool and click between the inside corners there, and I'm going to put a 2-inch bulge in it that will match the original trunk. Remember, SketchUp creates curves with short line segments. In this case, the default 12 segments works very nicely. That's the number of staves that I want to create. So I just leave it at that. If you wanted more staves, you would change the number to suit. And now I'm going to use offset, a keyboard shortcut for that. And I'm going to make a 1/2-inch offset. That's going to create the thickness for the staves. And then I'm going to draw in the shape of the first stave. So what I'm looking for here is that face. I went across here to create a little horizontal spot. That's going to be for that stave to sit on. I'll put a ledge on the inside of these parts when we get to that point. And now, before I go any farther with this, I'm going to make this a component. Actually, let me orbit around here so I can see what I'm doing. And so I'm going to hit the G key. This is going to be stave 1. I want to make sure that replace selection with component is checked. Older versions of SketchUp wouldn't remember your choice for that, so you would have to make sure to check that. With 2016 and 2017, the checkbox will remain selected if you've set that. It just assumes that's what you always want to do. I'm also going to set the component axes so that they align with the geometry. And I'm just using this corner. It doesn't really matter so much where, but that's an easy one. And then I'm going to come up along this edge with the green. And after setting that, I'll click on Create. And it's thinking about whether I had already done this in the model. But there's that component. Now we need one more stave. And it's easiest to look and see something in the background if you've actually created the face, or in this case the face came up as reversed. I'll just go ahead, and it doesn't matter at this point, but I'll go ahead and reverse it anyway. Could have left that alone, because when I make this 3D it'll fix itself. Double click on that face to select the face and its bounding edges. This will be stave 2, and again make sure that replace selection with component is selected. I'm going to set the component axes. Let's orbit around here so we can put the red in where it belongs. And create. Alright. We don't need the rest of this. These arcs, because those are going to take... Actually, let me put them back for a moment. I'm going to select that one, and I'm going to use Find Center, which is... I believe that started with 2016. And now we can get rid of those arcs. This stave is going to get copied with the rotate tool. So I'm going to, I hit the right arrow key, cursor key, to stand the cursor up the way I want. And we'll hit Control to make sure we're copying. That'd be Option on the Mac. And then all I have to do is copy that up here and hit Enter. And let's see, I think 4 is the right number here. Does that get us up to the middle? It does. So that's a total of 6 staves. So 5 of the narrow ones and 1 at the edge. And now I'm going to copy these to make the other half. So with those all selected, I get the Move tool and hit Control. And it doesn't really matter where, probably in this case the easiest thing to do is just copy these out here and get them out away from the original set. Right click, choose Flip along the green direction, and then we can just grab a corner and bring it over to match here. And you see that fits in very nicely right there, as well as at the other end. We can go ahead now and make these 3D if we want. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy them down to this end. And I see that it's 36 inches. I'm going to go 35 1/4. That'll leave me space for the end pieces. And I'll come back and trim the others, trim these at this end in the moment. I'll just double click on one of these and with the push-pull tool. And now this I can bring in 3/4 of an inch and double click here, and they're trimmed to length. I think there'd be a little tongue on here, and that wouldn't be very difficult to add. In fact, let's just go ahead and do that. So I'm going to open one of these for editing, and I think I'll just make the tongue half the thickness of the stave. And I'm going to pull that out. Let's go 3/8 of an inch. And we'll orbit round to the other side and do this on this end. And we'll just make it like that. I think that'll work. Alright. The rest of these are pretty easy to manage. We'll just do that, and you can see that because I'm using a component for that stave, they all got the same treatment. We'll pull that end out as well. There we go. So now let's put the bevels on these pieces. I'm going to open this piece for editing to start with, this component, and I'm just going to select that edge. Now there are a lot of ways we could trim this. I'm just going to use kind of a simple inferencing sort of method. So I've got the Move tool. I'm going to move that down and make sure I'm on the blue axis. In fact, we can hit the up arrow key, and that locks us on the blue axis. And then if we just bring the cursor up here onto the top of that first stave, that will make that bevel match the angle of that first stave. I'll do it again with this one. So move tool, up arrow, grab it, oops, get it moving, and then the up arrow, and move the cursor up onto the surface. Of course, with this one, we could also just use the inference off the other component that we just beveled. And the back ones are also beveled. That's pretty easy there. Let's put in that ledge real quick. And so what I'm going to do here is this piece is only going to get it like that, and we'll come in here 1/4 of an inch. This piece being longer, I'm going to use a little different method, and it gets the ledge along its whole length. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that edge, the bottom edge, up, and then use push-pull to pull that out and make the lip. So if I pull a copy of this thing off here, you can see that it's got the rabbit along the edge. Alright, just a couple little bits to finish up here. And I think what we'll do is I'm just going to bring this piece up, this component up, like that. And I might as well go ahead and trim that one off. So I can just trace. Now I could use the move tool and move the ends and that sort of thing, but I think this time I'll just use push-pull. And that piece, I'm not going to bother giving that a name. And we'll copy that over here. Flip that along the green direction to make a mirrored copy. And then I have to make one more part. And so I've drawn a rectangle on the top of that rail, and I'll just pull this up like so. Draw it the same way I drew the first arc. 2-inch bulge. And push-pull. And you see now, after I triple click this edge got selected, and the one back here did as well. We don't need those. And again, I'm not going to worry about the names on those parts. Move those down, and I'm going to flip those along the red direction so that they're mirrored. So this is the lid basically completed. There's a little joinery work to do at the ends, but what I wanted to cover next is actually figuring out how you could make these staves and what's the angles that you need to use. So since I changed the axis on these so that they fit correctly, our cut list, if we were to run one of those, would give us the right dimensions. And then as far as the bevel angle that we need, we can use the tape measure tool to figure that. And so what I'm going to do, just kind of, this is more for sort of clarification, but I'm going to put a guideline at 90 degrees to the bottom edge here, because then we can check the angle between square and the edge of the stave. So it's about 2.033. It's about 2 degrees. I would imagine that a 2-degree setting on the table saw would be pretty darn close to that. Well, and what about this one down at the bottom? Here we've got this edge here. We'll just measure that off the top. It's easy enough that way. So if I come up here and measure down this way, that's square there, so we're gonna measure down here, and it looks to me like we need about 22.368 degrees. By the way, if you're not getting your angles displayed to as many decimal points as you'd like, go to Window, Model Info, Units, and you can change the precision. I've set it as high as it'll go with 3 decimal places. Most of the time I don't really care about having it like that, but for something like this it's nice to know a little bit more precisely what those angles are. So those bevel angles would be pretty easy to figure out from the model now, and if you wanted you could add the joinery details, or you could head out to the shop and start making these parts. Edit, unhide the last stuff, and short of the hardware and a little joinery, the trunk is finished.